Welcome to Lecture 1.1 for AP World History. Key Concept 1.1 is about big geography and the peopling of the Earth. Archaeological evidence indicates that during the Paleolithic era, hunting, foraging bands of humans gradually migrated from their origin in East Africa to Eurasia, Australia, and the Americas, adapting their technology and cultures to new climatic regions. Here's a map of some of our movements super early on. Basically, we originated in Africa, and as we entered into what's called an interglaciation period, the Earth was warmer. And as a result of that, the animals started to move further into Europe and into Asia, and of course down into Australia. Another reason why people were able to move around is that there were new available lands that could be used for food sources. And so we were able to move out of Africa into what will eventually be considered colder regions. The Paleolithic Age is called the Old Stone Age. We lived as foragers in hunter-gatherer societies, and we of course were nomadic. As a result of that, we had slow population growth. It's very difficult to be pregnant and be nomadic. It's difficult to move around a lot. It's difficult for infant survival rates. And so there was a limit put on population. It's not necessarily that women were not getting pregnant, but a lot of those pregnancies would end, or some of those the children would not survive because of the harsh conditions of a nomadic lifestyle. How we survived was we would live in large enough tribes to defend ourselves from animals and from other hunter-gatherer societies. And of course, we did have to establish some type of housing because as we moved further into colder regions, we had to give ourselves shelter. And we did that by using caves. We have proof of this through cave paintings in France, actually. Our clothing was going to be made out of animal, of course. The mammoth was a very important animal to our ancestors who were foragers. There was a belief in the afterlife, and we know this because there have been grave markings. Most of these grave markings had residue of some kind of floral arrangement, and so there was some type of belief in the afterlife and that there was something after this life. Part A states that humans used fire in new ways. They used it to aid hunting and foraging, to protect against predators, and to adapt to cold environments. There is a debate about whether we migrated out of Africa with fire or whether it developed in Europe due to colder climates. It's unclear, and there's controversy about the dating of some of the archaeological evidence of the use of fire. Basically, one of the biggest changes for humans is the fact that we started cooking our food. Cooked food allows us to eat more high caloric and high protein diets, and that allowed our brains to grow and of course our bodies to grow a little bit stronger. And as a result, we developed larger brains. Those larger brains will ultimately lead to new tools and technology, which could have led to the development of agriculture. We also started to do a lot more social interaction as part of the use of fire. The fire pit and the hearth became the center of social life, as you would eat a family meal together. So the meal was prepared, and then you would have social interaction while you ate that meal. That change is going to be important to family development and to social development. We know that there was fire due to charred wood and bones in certain caves, and it suggests that we had more permanent dwellings than we originally thought as far as being nomads. Now, we probably lived in these caves for seasons or for different grazing seasons as we followed animals. And most of the fire that we have found is in Europe, which leads back to that debate about whether fire existed when we left Africa or whether it's something that we adopted and used once we got into Europe. Letter B states that humans developed a wider range of tools specifically adapted to different environments from tropics to tundra. Tools vary from location to location, and this makes sense because of the availability of the resources and what the land needed to be worked. And so you won't find tools made out of reindeer antlers in Africa because reindeer weren't in Africa. Most tools were stone, and we began using bones towards the end of the Paleolithic Age, which will eventually lead us out of the Stone Age into more complex tool making. C. Religion was most likely animistic. Animistic religions worship nature-based gods. They are polytheistic and it varied by region. Most animistic religion had an earth mother deity. The feminine deity goes back to the idea of the feminine being able to birth children. It was something unique to the gender that was very misunderstood. They did not totally understand how or why the process happened, and so it was considered to be something associated with the gods, and fertility was associated with the gods, and so it makes sense that the feminine had a lot of power early on. And of course, these nature-based gods are basically gods that were in charge of rain or snow or, water or whatever. And it was a way to explain the universe around us because there was no science, and so this is the only way they could explain why it would rain. Part D states that economic structures focus on small kinship groups of hunting, foraging bands that could make what they needed to survive. However, not all groups were self-sufficient. They did exchange people, ideas, and goods. Our economic structure during this time was hunting and gathering. Some exchange and trade did take place, but it was limited, and there's no set exchange system in place. Basically, what that means is that if you ran across another band of hunting and gathering, you may trade, but there was no trade routes, there was no monetary system, there was no value. The value was 100% need-based. There was nothing in an advanced economic system at all. Here's some resources for some of this information if you wanted to look up some more on the use of fire or some of our early cave paintings. Thank you for listening.